And there we go. You'll notice some mob themes here. Only at the start, in case you get sick of them, because I ran out of pictures I could find on Reddit around Breaking Bad and such. So I'm super glad you guys are here. I think collecting money online is both kind of a really, at first glance, kind of a dry topic, not the most exciting transactions. Clicking donate. Our friends from IATS may disagree, but it's not, it's not sexy stuff. Sexy stuff is bringing people to your website, measuring that, converting them, driving them down that funnel. But it's a super important topic. As Eli said, my role is generally as operations manager at Chimp Foundation. Chimp's a part of a few other companies. And so I work a lot in the transactional nature. I also work a lot because transactions often in the sort of larger space tend to be highly legal in nature. Tend to work a lot in the benefit, which is sort of the more legal side of this group of companies. Last month, I'll put some context on this. Last month, Chimp Foundation processed $11 million in giving to charities in Canada. And why that number is important, because that was a mix of credit cards, that was a mix of cash, private securities, public securities, life insurance policies, checks. Basically every form of giving to charities, not every form, there's definitely more, we process. And the reason why I bring that up is, as much as we're talking about today, and we'll kind of hone in on sort of the transactional, give my credit card, enter it in and click donate, recognizing that online donations take everything from the baller who's giving $5 million in his company in Apple, right through to the buddy who's giving $5 or whatever credit card minimum processing level is on your site. That's online donations. For us, there's no distinction between what happens with a credit card online and what happens with a privately traded security, because at the end of the day, for Chimp Foundation, and what I believe will be true for all of us very soon, is it's all online. It's all happening online. There's still lots of relationship offline. There's still lots of lawyers involved in those things and lots of movements. But the transaction, that point of giving, if our online experience was not good, it doesn't matter how much relationship building, it doesn't matter, well, maybe enough relationship building and enough lawyering could push that sucker through. But it worked because we built a platform that could facilitate it online. And I don't say that necessarily to pimp Chimp, and that's probably hopefully the last time you'll really hear me talk about Chimp. But I say that more to recognize that this is about a spectrum, and we're all going to kind of be somewhere on that spectrum. For today's purposes, we're going to be narrowing. I realize if I point to the screen, it doesn't quite work. And we're going to be honing in on that last part, this part here, right here. So you've gotten the donor. And you've gotten the donor aware of your nonprofit. You've kind of educated them a bit about what you are doing, why you matter in the world. Hopefully form some form of connection with that donor. They're like, yeah, I like this. And ultimately, hopefully, they've trusted you at some point with their money and with your ability to see their dreams fulfilled in the world, whatever that may be. And so that point of commitment, when I click, yes, I want to give to this charity, I want to partner financially with them, I want to invest in what they're doing. And it's that point, that investment, that transaction level is what we're going to kind of focus on today. The reason why it's a funnel, and my sort of hypothesis is that, as you move down that funnel, the opportunity cost of that donor becomes crazy high. So when you're just browsing the internet, there's 100 great sites, and every site looks awesome and engaging. But as they get down to that, yes, I want to commit, they become, not that they're not valuable as human beings, but they become super valuable to you as a charity because they are willing to kind of engage in a very real and practical way. So obviously lots of other engagement methods and other talks can cover those. So it's a massive opportunity cost, and that's why it matters incredibly much to focus on it. Of course, what I personally find more interesting is all that stuff that happens after it, because after they've partnered with you financially, you either become their favorite mistake or you become a way for them to continue to partner with you in an ongoing manner. Credit to Sheryl Crow. So I love this topic. I think it matters a whole ton because it kind of is that crux between I'm interested, and yes, I want to partner with it, and I think it's something that we can spend a little bit of time tonight focusing on. My apologies in advance. This conversation may be a bit intro, and the reason why it's going to be a bit intro is there are lots of variations on a theme. There's lots of different companies springing up every month, every week it feels like. There are lots of different ways to solicit donations, and those are cool and awesome, and we should be aware of what the marketplace is holding. But we got to get the fundamentals right, and I hope maybe today we can focus a little bit on some of the fundamentals and give you a framework at least to then ask the questions. So when a new competitor, or not competitor, new product comes on the marketplace, we can kind of go, okay, so what's the frame of reference that we should be using to judge this product and judge this way of taking money online? Because there's always going to be a better donate now button. There's always going to be a new thing taking donations on Facebook. And it's either going to suck or be awesome. But if we don't have a foundation for how we evaluate that stuff, yeah, we're going to be flying blind. And I think to some degree we kind of are. So really quickly, is there anybody, I already kind of know the answer for open media, but is there anybody collecting donations online currently who works for a nonprofit? Awesome. Let me see. How many, or charitable org, I don't want to discriminate. How many of you are using Canada Helps? Two. Emily Carr is. Oh no, they switched. Right, Brooke. How many of you are using your own payment processor? Awesome. Do you mind if I ask?
Well,
oh, is it
kind of
complicated?
Old school. No. We basically have a form that people fill out, and then it gets.
Okay.
We go in and print it off, and then process it in-house.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
We use it too.
Okay, sweet. They used to have an office right here. But, I don't know, they're back east now. Cool. Did I miss anybody? Canada Helps?
We're using both Canada Helps and Chip.
Oh, okay, cool. Very cool. And I guess hopefully over time, you know, we'll see what we can do about that. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, sweet. So, if I haven't convinced you that this matters a lot, I thought a few examples from the for-profit world would help. Shopify, the little Canadian company that could. They're not so little. They were just valued at, I think in the summer, they're valued at just over $1 billion. They're valued at $1 billion, in my opinion, because they can do something that most mom and pop stores can't do, and that is convert. They can convert people who want to buy a product to buy that product. They can shove product through a pipeline, and they can take interesting ideas and make them into sales. And the business community said, that's super valuable. Let us give you more money so you can do this even more for us. Amazon, I think 116-ish billion, and they haven't really even turned that much of revenue from that 116 billion, but they're obviously really good at shoving products through a pipeline. They have converted eyeballs into buyers. Obviously, Big Commerce is doing very well. Big Cartel is doing very well. Yeah, there's, you know, again, probably if in the not-for-profit world there's a new person springing up every month, there's probably a new one of these every day. But the point is that they've taken these ideas of taking eyeballs and figured out ways to convert those eyeballs into real sales and real dollars, and the business community has responded to that. I think the not-for-profit community, I think the charitable sector deserves better. I think we deserve that same ability, not in a manipulative way, but in a way to go, I want to partner with my cause. I deserve the best possible tool to help turn that person who's somewhat interested into a committed buyer, into a believer in my cause, a financial partner. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to more people coming at that problem with that mindset and going, if I'm interested in your cause, I better be sold right through the donation experience and just want to be your financial best friend for the next 10 years. And we'll look at some of the numbers of what those people are worth in a monetary sense. This sounds really crude, and they're worth more than just money. So we'll focus on some lighter stuff. I recently bought a suit through Indochino. and I recently bought a pair of pants. Done more than these two purchases in my life, but I recently bought a pair of pants through Bonobos. And both of those were unreal customer service experiences. I happen to know the people behind Indochino, but that was not what made that experience so great. It wasn't, hey Jeff, we know you, we're gonna shower you with gifts. I was an anonymous buyer, and they made my experience amazing. Bonobos, I was an anonymous buyer trying out their experience, and they made my experience fantastic. Those two companies have done fairly well because they have helped steward eyeballs not just through to the transaction point, but right through. The minute you get your suit from Indochino, it's, hey, how does that fit? Does it fit all right? Because if not, we'll pop by. Bonobos, it's, I will be your personal fit ninja, and I hate that word ninja nowadays, but I will be so dedicated to making sure your pair of pants fits that I'm willing to, here's my direct cell phone number, here's my direct email address. Those guys have figured it out right through the process of from the beginning to the funnel, through that transaction point, and right to the end. And I hope, before we dive into the tools, what I'm hoping to drive home is that me buying a suit or buying a pair of pants on Bonobos was not the same as me paying my MasterCard bill. It wasn't the same as me paying my phone bill. It's those guys realized that my purchase of those pants was totally voluntary. I wasn't going to get fined if I didn't buy those pants. I wasn't going to have MasterCard banging on the door. My purchase of those pants was totally voluntary, and as a result, they knew they had to take such good care of me before, during, and after, so I would continue to buy more flipping pairs of pants. Not these ones, but they are bright as well. And I think there's parallels there with the charitable sector. I hope there's parallels there. I hope that we can be known as people that, yes, we're transacting online, but we are so concerned with that donor's experience before, during, and after the process that we're not just getting caught up in this world of how fast can we get the money and get out, which is was usually often my mantra when doing fundraising. And we'll look at some of the tools, and you can start to see how when nonprofits confuse donating with paying your phone bill or donating with purchasing a product, i.e. update cart and check out, why perhaps that's problematic. Because maybe those experiences aren't the same experiences, and maybe we shouldn't be treating all financial transactions online as the same thing. So, let's just look at what that means for the nonprofit sector. This number, right, the second number here is wrong, and that's the $2.1 billion is the crowdfunding figure. But ultimately, these stats all point to one thing. But yeah, online giving growth is up for generally. This is for medium-sized nonprofits, 14% year over last, versus offline, which is down 1.5. 1 in 5 go to your site specifically to make a donation. That stat is like from 5 years ago. Nobody's done something that's kind of interesting or speaks to that point that I could find at least, so we're going with it. Cumulative lifetime value, that's also old. It's about 3 years old, and I believe, we don't know what the cumulative lifetime value of an online donor is. If this stat's honest, they've got no flipping clue, because donors aren't dead yet that have started giving, started by giving online. So, I'm sure that their estimations are close. Self-described as more loyal. There's a lot of theories as to why to that, because they're connected. They're right on the site. They usually have their email address, so you can stay in touch. It's usually not a street-based sort of canvassing style gift. User experience by numbers. Donations via giving portal yield around 30% average smaller gifts. This is by a major giving portal company, Network for Good, down in the States. And overall giving on sites that redirect to unbranded gateways, so you can read into that, is 6 times lower than those on branded pages, and there's a lot that speaks there to the previous 2 slides of experience matters. And there's only 3 things that matter from these stats. The first, these stats don't even speak to, and the first, and we'll hammer it home by the end, is that tools don't raise money, people raise money. There's the best fundraising tool in the world. The first time I gave this talk was like 8 years ago it was a version of, and I got pulled aside and was told that by an older gentleman who was absolutely correct. And so now I make sure I say that at every talk, because tools don't raise money, people do. The donation experience matters an incredible amount. Those stats to the left speak to that, and those are interesting numbers and they're good for marketing purposes, but we know it because we've seen it and we've proved it. We've proved it in our own lives when we buy things. And the third thing that I think matters most is it's not an if, it's a when, and it's a how much. Well, there is not a question of if donations are moving online, if transactions are happening online. They are. There's still a highly, highly relational component to all giving. There's still a highly relational component offline to stewardship, and absolutely. But giving, the transactional nature of giving is happening online, and we need to be building tools that help that facilitation process. So, diving in. So the two assumptions I'm making going over these tools is that you're absolutely convinced donor experience matters a very great deal, and you're absolutely convinced that the facilitation of charity, the facilitation of transactional charity, is online, and it's here but not yet. It is online, and and that's kind of non-negotiable. So with that, here's where we're going. The people you need to know, the terms you need to know, the questions you need to ask, and the solutions you should look at. And as I said at the start, this is a flyover. This is I think the talk, well, it was called More Money, More Problems, but what is meant to be called was Processing 101. And I'm totally happy to take questions that are more specific or to be challenged. Absolutely. I am not an expert. I'm a guy who's used a lot of different donation things, and just as a donor and as a whatever guy who used to work for still works for a nonprofit, used to work more, whatever. Happy to be challenged and happy to be pushed back if you say, well, what about this term, or what about this? Why didn't you include that? Let's have that conversation, because I certainly don't know it all. Definitely not. So without further ado, the people you need to know. I'm really only going to talk on one very important person, well, maybe two, but we'll get to the second family a little bit later. The CRA. So, as I mentioned, sort of a good chunk of my job is working with a law firm that does giving, and giving that happens online and offline. It's all online, maybe not. So the CRA is our best and worst friend. This is being recorded, so I will speak very kindly. Here are a few things that I wandered over to our compliance officer lawyer and said, so if somebody's giving online, what do they need to know? And she's the only person in our office that absolutely scares me. So here's what she told me now. Proper receipting and storage of information for audit trails. Everything you do, every receipt you issue has to be stored properly and has to be trackable via an audit trail. We'll get to how these various solutions manage that, and a lot do on your behalf, but you got to know that. Canceling a receipt and the ability to reissue said receipt. Donation receipts, and again, with respect to the CRA, obviously legislation on this stuff's a little bit behind, or non-specific, but issued receipts cannot be reasonably tampered with, and reasonably is in quotes. So you can't tamper with a PDF is sort of the golden rule there, and obviously you can, and my 12-year-old nephew can, but that's the idea from the CRA's perspective. You can't be issuing receipts in Word documents, .x. Donor receipt information is secure. This is less of a CRA and more of a BC privacy thing, but important nonetheless. You better be certain, and I say this with respect, but the volume of people who do this by accident is staggering. You have to be sure that if you are a nonprofit, you are not issuing tax receipts. If you are a charitable org, you are issuing tax receipts. ultimately, from the CRA's perspective, you can choose whatever the heck donation solution you want. If it has your number, your business number, you're liable. So if you are handing over that number to somebody else to issue receipts on your behalf, there is still a level of liability that you cannot offload onto somebody else and say, it's a third party, we're trusting them. If it has your number on it, if it has a signature of your executive director on it, or whomever is authorized to sign those receipts, you are accountable to that. Other than that, we'll get to the other family that you need to know, and that's around PCI compliance and security in a second. But really, for the people you need to know, I would suggest that the CRA is number one. And in terms of those things that I just mentioned, there are a lot of the solutions that will cover that, handle that, thankfully, on your behalf. But it's important to kind of go through that and go, okay, so who's issuing the tax receipt? If it's me, do I trust the third party to be doing it effectively on my behalf? If it's not me, that's awesome to some degree. So it has somebody else's name, i.e. Canada Helps on it. Totally great. Just recognizing, the pros and cons to those. If it's not your registration number, then issues around issue receipts can't be reasonably tampered, blah, blah, blah. They become the charity org that's issuing that, i.e. Canada Helps. This is issue and not yours. But if that's something you do want to take in-house, you have to be able to manage that on your behalf. Terms. I started with a list that filled up the whole page, and I'd love in the Q&A if somebody else said, well, this is a really great term you should know. Maybe you guys can help with that. But these are some that I encounter every day, and the next slide kind of maps out how these various parties in a very crude form interact. Payment processor. When we're talking payment processor, that is the company that is, I'm super conscious that you guys can speak to this 1,000 times better than me. They are the company that's taking your credit card and going, I as a donor, and give my credit card number via some means to a payment processor. Payment processor is checking with what's called the issuing bank. So who's ever actually issuing that credit card and saying, do we have permission to charge this guy's card $100? Does he have room on his credit? Card stolen, all that, yada, yada, yada. They're sending that back to you, the nonprofit, saying, yeah, go ahead, charge. And this is all happening instantly. Go ahead, charge that card. And then the payment processor is charging the card, collecting the money, and then depositing the money into the merchant bank. Merchant bank, is that correct?
That's right.
Awesome. Now you know, great. The merchant bank, in a lot of cases, that's often the same as your payment processor, but not always. Merchant bank is where they're depositing that money into. So if I bank at TD, I can open up a merchant bank account at TD, and TD's payment processor or one of their trusted parties, like BeanStream, can deposit money into my merchant bank. And then I, as a nonprofit, because I control that bank account, get the money. It comes, in my checking account or my savings account. So payment processor charges the card, deposits the money into the merchant bank. Gateway, for the purposes of this conversation, gateway is the term that I'm using to refer to the interface that your payment processor has with Joe Donor. So the guy that's coming to your site, hey, I want to make a donation. How I'm entering my thing. Where am I entering it into? You're entering that into a gateway, which is ultimately connected payment processor. Portal, for the purpose of this conversation, I'm using it to reference sort of a site that kind of handles that all encompassing. So Canada Helps would be an example of that in the terms and the examples that we're giving. Canada Helps is kind of all in one. They have their own payment processor, merchant bank, blah, blah, blah. But you're just sending people there and you're done with it. PCI compliance. If you are processing payments on your website, you are responsible for PCI compliance. PCI compliance is the payment something, and it's something that actually a lot of nonprofits don't follow. A lot of charities use, and we'll talk to this solution, which is an awesome solution. Let's say PayPal Payments Pro. So it's PayPal's like white labeled version, and you install it on your site. because you are accepting credit cards on your site, you are responsible for getting PCI compliance. It's not hard. It's rarely followed up, and nobody's probably making sure you do it, but you are saying to the payment processing companies of this world, yes, I have the proper compliance measures to accept payments on my website. And the staggering number of nonprofits, charities that do not do this is mind-blowing. The fine is around $10,000 a month for every month you're found non-compliant, but we'll take that gamble, right? That's the cynic in me coming out. So a lot of people who manage to do this with charities don't do that. You do have to do it. There's not like a seal that I can tell, so donors don't really know to ask for it, but you got to have it. SSL, we're all a lot more familiar with. The less in the top of your corner, you get SSL certification via a third-party provider. You pay, and they make your site secure. Intercharge fees and processing fees. Generally, when you sign up with a payment processor, and again, we'll map this out in a second, so I'm just kind of dumping a bunch at you. Processing fees, it costs 2% to process a credit card. Intercharge fees are the variable fee depending on the card. So if I have an Amex Black, that 2% is 2% plus 3% for an Amex Black, or it's much higher for that. If I have a Visa Enviro Visa, it's free, or it's just the 2% plus maybe a little bit off the top. So it's a very confusing industry because often you don't know in advance what the fee that you're being charged on that specific card is, and you don't have the ability to object. So if I go to a charity site who's processing payments in-house, and I give them a punch in my credit card, and I'm using an Amex Black, that charity's just lost a good chunk of change. But I, as the charity, have no, I don't get to see the card. I have no forewarning. I can't say just accept low cards. It's a tough industry. Thankfully, there's a lot of great payment processors that are kind of now saying, we get it, that's really tough. We'll bundle it up and we'll give you a flat fee. It may not be as cheap as your flat straight-up processing fee, but it's going to be a pretty good representation. We'll hedge our bets. We'll say you're taking probably between, say, 2 and 4%. We'll give you 2.8%. And that's really nice for accounting purposes, for knowing straight up. It can hurt you a bit on some ends, and it can really help you on some other ends, and that's the risk you take. Chargebacks, the reason I threw that in there is this is an important one. That's why, I'm trying to not use chimp-centric things, but that's why I say Canada Helps. And Chimp does the same thing. If I'm making a donation, the money doesn't instantly appear in my bank account. It's held by the processing company, and they want to make sure that those funds are going to clear. And if they're not, it's very messy to pull money back from a nonprofit. What do you do with that tax receipt, for example, if those funds bounce? When you sign on with a payment processor, you're authorizing them effectively to go into your bank account and pull that money out if for some reason that card was stolen, or who knows why. That's why funds have a holding period on them for them to clear. So it doesn't eliminate all of it, but it helps reduce that. And a branded site, what I mean by that, and I could show you an example, is a charity that has a payment processor integrated right on their website. So everything is, and we'll go over examples of this obviously, but when you click donate, you never leave their site, no modal pops up, it's just straight up integrated into the website. And that's where a lot of those terms really do apply. That was a lot. I toyed with writing them out, and I'm happy to, but we can kind of clarify them. But you'll see in a second why some of them may or may not matter, and kind of how they all relate to one another. So really quickly, I as a donor go to your website. I click donate. I'm going to see a form of some form that's either going to live on my site, in which case, got to have PCI compliance, SSL, or I'm going to a third-party site or a modal, as in Chimp's case. I'm entering my credit card information. That's going to my payment processor, who's going, can we charge this card? Yes. Depositing the funds into the merchant bank. I threw the database system in there because a lot of nonprofits then it's like, okay, great, send the details, like the non-essential, like address, email address, blah, 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 into our Excel sheet. And then ultimately it's ending up into your bank account. That's what I mean when I say donation systems. And these are basically, there's a lot of, and we'll go over some examples, a lot of companies who kind of squish that whole process together and manage it on your behalf. And you pay for that, but that's what those are. Yeah,
It's confidential.
that was the old template. Super proud of it. It's spent a lot of intellectual property on that. Any other questions to Moment?
I have a quick
Yeah.
question. When you say PCI compliant, can you provide an example of what?
Yeah. So there's different tiers of PCI compliance, and those tiers are set depending on how much money you're processing, right? So if I'm if I'm processing, let's say under, I think it's like $500,000, they want to know that my servers are secure, and I have to hire a company, to scan those. And there's set PCI compliance people. It's a bit of a cash grab to scan that. I have to voluntarily, if you're under a certain dollar value, and don't quote me on the $500,000, but I voluntarily agree to, yes, I'm storing information in accordance with blah, blah, blah. And you voluntarily agree at this like 12 points. So you do the voluntary assessment and you do a scan, and that together you submit, and they give you your PCI compliance. And the thing with it is that there's no seal. There's nothing that you like put on your website so donors know. We're all just flying blind and trusting. So when we break it down to different solutions, I'll do my best to kind of go, you don't have to be PCI compliant if you're using the service. And I don't mean to say PCI compliance to scare you. It's just something you have to be aware of. It's not that hard to get. You just have to get it if you want to be legit. A lot of solutions. And as I mentioned, where we're going to land is kind of trying to establish together a framework for evaluating these things and for understanding it. Because if we get caught up in all the details and the new products that come out, we're gonna get buried. There's a lot of noise in this industry, and there are a lot of different solutions facing nonprofits. So my solution with it is you've got to kind of come up with your list of what matters most to you. And I'll give you a hint. Probably transaction cost is not the most important thing to you. There's the next slide actually kind of covers this. This was just off the top of my head last night of things that could matter to a nonprofit or to a charity when collecting donations online. Does it give me they may not matter to you. In fact, a lot of them don't necessarily matter to me per se. I'm not smart enough to do anything with them, but absolutely. If anybody has anything else that may matter to a charity when collecting donations online.
Conversion?
Absolutely. Awesome. So, did I leave that off there?
Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. That's like, for me, that's number one.
That's what I thought.
So, that's awkward. It was really late. Now I'm just drinking. I wasn't, but yeah. Anything else?
What do you mean by peer-to-peer options?
So, does my donation solution have the ability for Bob, who's really passionate about my cause, not just to give, but to set his own campaign up? Like crowdfund, but not from an organization-driven perspective. From I'm Bob, I want to throw a dinner party for Dave Suzuki Foundation. Isn't that great how everybody still points to Eli for Dave Suzuki?
I'm retired.
Loyalty.
Is that also the same as like that, like the Ride to Conquer thing or Walk to Conquer other thing?
Similar. The difference that I refer to from peer-to-peer is it would be as if I, who's really passionate about cancer or about ending cancer or conquering it, not many people are, cancer doctors are passionate about cancer, and want to start my Ride to, my own thing for cancer, versus in your, we're splitting hairs, but it's an important distinction there, is that the other example is more me as Cancer Charity X wanting to start a ride to engage other people to fundraise for me, for my cause. So they're two sides. Yeah. Alright, I mean, give string, that's like, it's really important that donors be able to give $3 and whatever UGM saying, $3.96. And they see that on the website, right? Obviously, if that's number one or like number two after conversion, then I'm probably going to need a custom option, right? Obviously, like that's if keeping a very low transaction cost is the absolute most important thing, obviously that's going to skew how I look at things. I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't say that like monthly giving is not important. Yeah, so we start by ranking, and as you pointed out, number one to rank is conversion, in my opinion. And that would be, if I were running a website, I would want to know what's the conversion rate and what do I do to help increase that. And you go from there, and it's going to be totally different for every different nonprofit. But the important thing is to start asking those questions, not almost in some ways before you dive into what tools are out there.
The one thing that I think is missing from this is fraud.
Fraud, yeah, absolutely. Maybe, yeah, so security, but fraud is a whole other one. Anecdotally, I used to work for or help do payments for a large charity in town that was just consistently hammered with, $5 fraud, and like consistently, and the payment processor charges every time, there's a transaction cost to that. And so if your payment processor isn't on top of it and is able to shut it down, you're getting screwed in nickel and dimes, like literally. Chargebacks. Every time you get a chargeback, you're getting a fee ding. So that's super valid. Yeah.
So it's almost like a financial DDoS.
DDoS.
Like
Yeah.
Denial of service attack, right? That's what it sounds like.
And
It sounds malicious.
yeah, and a lot of. What did you say?
I'd say it sounds malicious.
Oh, malicious. Well, attacks are, yeah, for sure.
But the way you describe it, that's what it's
Yeah.
Well, the big thing with fraud is if people steal credit cards
Yeah.
and they go online to test
Mm-hmm.
whether the credit card numbers are valid. So they'll run thousands of credit cards through your online website at $4 or $5 charges,
And you're getting chargebacks.
and you're going to obviously, as soon as they find a credit card number that works, they're going to buy their rates.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they will use your sites,
Mhm.
non-profit sites specifically, to try and run those high volume
Yeah.
full card and name company.
That's super valid because, nonprofit sites tend to be super highly targeted because they're generally often not the most sophisticatedly built. They're easy targets. People, they assume, don't monitor it very well. So it's really important. One of the things I also forgot here, and again, like this was like last night going, I should give some examples, is support. Massive, right? Like, who do you call? Who do you call when you're... I'm going to be super cautious not to slam things, but who do you call when your PayPal thing goes down? I don't know. And I haven't tried, so in fairness. But that could be important for some people, which is fair. So support both pre, during, and post, massive, in my opinion. So this list feels really short to me, and it kind of is. What I kind of want to get at when we start looking at some of the specifics around tools, because tools change and because new people are coming into the space all the time, is kind of give an example of what I would say crawl, walk, run, fly, and more highlight them as indicative of types versus, this is the thing and this is the, this is the product you should use or not use, because, I'm well aware that there are lots of opinions and lots of awesome solutions out there, and so my role is not really to pimp one over the other, but try to give some things that I think are indicative of of different types. And I staggered it around crawl, walk, run, fly because I think the important thing here is to understand it's about progression. I don't think we as whether you're on the service providing side or the charity side should stop. I think we need to be continually going, not what's the newest gadget, how do I improve that donation experience? How do I wow them before, during, and after? And maybe you don't have a lot of control because of financial constraints or whatever over that during. Maybe you're locked in some crazy weird agreement with our friends at Blackbout, but maybe you can hone in on that pre, and maybe you can hone in on that post and kind of help compensate for that. Tonight's about that during, so we'll explore that. But the emphasis here is on progression, and I'm trying to actually even stay away from value judgment between, one over, oh, wait, skipped, out of order. Oh no. Nope, crap. Okay, that's all right, that's my bad. We're gonna go off the fly. Canada Helps. Some of the pros I think about Canada Helps. It's been around forever, super stable. Buddy started as an MBA project a billion years ago, and they've done a really great job of providing an awesome job, in fact, at providing a consistent donation experience for so many years now. It's a known entity, so by and large, your donors know about Canada Help. By and large, right? You still got, obviously, people who work with it are going to get, I'm sure, questions. But they know they know about it a lot more than they know about Chimp, so I'll give them that. Super easy to install, right? Put a link into your website. That's awesome. It's super affordable. It's 3.9% or 4.9% if you don't have direct deposits. That's great. Yes, there's more affordable and on and on, but that's not a greedy transaction rate in my opinion. And it's really easy to use from both the donor and the charity's perspective. In my opinion, I've worked with it for a bit. Some of the cons, they've got some site issues around cookies, and I often get your session is timed out error messages. It takes donors off the website right now. I hear that they're working on something which is sweet. Statistically, taking your donor off of a website onto an unbranded gated site reduces your gift by up to 6 times. I think that's a very high end. Again, that was put out by Network for Good, who does this, looking at $17 billion worth of gifts. So, but it does. You've formed a connection with them. They've come to your site. They're great. They're super engaged. Yes, I want to give. And all of a sudden, whoa, what is this other thing? So that for sure, it's a concern, but it's all relative. It's not the most social, and they used to, and I don't know if they do now, but they ask for a gift to Canada Helps mid-donation process, which is sort of an odd message midway. I get it; they're a charity, and that's so I think it's a great first step to accepting donations online. PayPal button. What I'm referring to with the PayPal button is the straight up click here, get taken to PayPal site. So a bit of clarification, those things around PCI and SSL, not your concern if you're using them, neither with Canada Helps, is going to PayPal site, they're secure, they're PCI compliant, it's their shtick. Some of the pros, super recognizable by and large, people know PayPal. It's really affordable if you're nonprofit, even if you're not. I mean, all relative, but it's a pretty affordable thing, product. Obviously, because it's just a button, from your perspective, it's super easy to install. You click a link, right? It's fairly easy to set up as well. And as I mentioned, security and PCI is all handled on their side, so it's not your concern. Some of the bad sides, or some of the things you want to take in consideration. It treats the donation process like a checkout process. You're updating your cart, you're checking out. It's quantity driven. It's not geared towards stewarding and making the Care Bear moment for your donors. It can be a bit confusing for a lot of donors. Oh, do I need a PayPal account? Don't I? People still ask that question, and it's a fair question to ask because there's PayPal's interest is in converting you to an account holder. Your interest as a charity is to get the money and get out within reason. And so there's kind of some competing messaging I find happening there. And it also takes users off your site. So the same issue in theory will apply where you form that connection, you throw them to an unbranded site. You're hoping that their heart and their head is good and they're going to follow through on this donation, but you lose people. You just necessarily do. And you're losing the people at that most valuable opportunity cost moment because they are committed and they drop off. It just happens. Some of the walk ones, Chimp Pros, it keeps donors on your webpage because it's a little modal that opens up. I don't work for this half of Chimp for the record, so it's not my really product to sell. It manages the security and compliance because it's a modal, so it's not actually on your site, but it looks like it is. It's super easy to install. It's one link, one bit of code, and it's super affordable. Some of the cons. Some charities can find that because Chimp issues the tax receipt, they don't like that. That's both a pro and a con. Chimp Foundation is a registered Canadian foundation, so the liability on tax receipting is on us, Chimp. There's no huge flaw in the product. I've expressed as such. There's no memo to charity, so I can't make a note to the charity during the giving process. That's pretty important, I think. They're working on it. It's basic. It's not going to give you, all the bells and whistles that we'll cover in a second. So, and some people find that you can't give by PayPal to be a downside. I'm indifferent, but that's fair. Artez and gift tools, totally fair that maybe it's not fair to lump both of those. I'm referring to their entry-level donation solution. I think it's an awesome, there's some huge strengths because it kind of mirrors your website. It's kind of a bit of both. They manage the security and stuff because it's hosted by them, but they've ripped your CSS, your skin of your website and put it on theirs. So the only donors that are looking at the URL will know that it's not on your website. I mean, some other things perhaps, but it's backed by another party, so they're handling the liability. It's fairly. I found Gift-Tool to be fairly well supported in my experience in working with them, and they can give you a fair bit of that customization that a lot of people want within reason. You're still operating within their box. Some of the cons. It can be a bit costly. You are playing within their sandbox, so you're not given full customization. You're just kind of given enough rope. It does a lot, but it may not do the one thing that you need. And when you try to force it to do something that's not, those things often don't always work well together. But both Artez and Gift-Tool are Canadian-ish companies, not really anymore. In the run, these are the same, Integrated Payments Pro and PayPal Payments Pro and a payment processor. I would say the reason I just indicated PayPal out there is because a lot of people think, oh, PayPal does the click and takes you off. PayPal also has, and Open Media is using this, it's a great example. They have an integrated solution that it's the Payments Pro solution. So it's like using a payment processor, because it is. So some of the pros around using a payment processor, and just some of the pros, tons of customization options. Really, if you can dream it and build it, which we'll get to, it's yours, right? That form can look totally like you want, because the payment processor, all they care about, let's put a little crass, but all they care about, name, card number, expiry date, CVV, and billing address, right? You can add a billion other forms to that if you really think that's valuable, and that's fine. It's yours to play with. Donors 100% on your site. There's no voodoo magic making it look like your page or not. It's there. It's embedded on your site. And generally, you will get a lower transaction rate as a result, right? Like, you're going basically direct. It's not technically direct, but you're going as direct as possible as probably you can be. So you're going to get a really aggressive or competitive processing rate.
You're also responsible for PCI compliance.
Absolutely. So in the cons, and one of the pro, before I get there, is that you have full control over things like analytics. You can embed, obviously, Google Analytics right into your donation form. You can see how people are migrating down there. You can make adjustments. Emphasis being on you, and also emphasis like you can if you have the staff and the technology and the ability to do that. Some of the cons that I find, and I've done a lot of the payment process. I used to work for a payment processor, so it's all DIY, right? It's all you. You're a developer, your time, I don't know, it's relying on you to think up what's the best donation form. My opinion is that other people do that better than you probably, but you are responsible for PCI compliance. You are saying to that payment processor, whether they audit you or not is a different question, but you are saying, I am PCI compliant. Odds of them checking may or may not be there, but it's your word. You're saying you're PCI compliant and you're able to process payments on your website. You obviously have to be SSL certified. Again, not hard. It's just the burden's on you. Burden's on you for everything, hosting, and you may have other costs. So, payment processing, I think, is an awesome. Going direct is awesome, but recognizing that you're responsible for paying for your PCI compliance, paying for your SSL, paying for your merchant bank if there's a fee that applies there. By and large, there is. Paying for the monthly fee for your payment processor. Those are all just things you have to factor in. You gain a lot, and it comes with you can evaluate the trade-off there. Fly, and there's a lot of ways we can go with Fly, but what I'm using to represent Fly is sort of those, and totally this is where having that foundation to evaluate whether it's right for you, because Fly is not right for a lot of people. And so that's why I hesitate to associate it in an order, because it's not always that clean cut. Blackbound, Pure Giving, Condio, or other sort of big, robust platform. Full customization, by and large, you'll get. It'll usually do everything and cook you dinner. It comes with a CRM, generally. So you're getting the real meal deal. These are charity, by and large, you're a charity that is processing a lot, or this is a really high value for you. It's usually should be fully integrated or look like your site. It should or possibly has a peer-to-peer or crowdfunding element included in the package, and we'll talk a bit about crowdfunding in a second. But yeah, it's the real deal. And it's not always mutually exclusive. You can still use other solutions with them, but they are sort of the more management side of that donor data, that whole experience, and it comes as a package. Some of the cons, it's expensive. You're generally locked in because the opportunity cost of switching is massive because you've kind of invested in this really big, robust thing. You better well be able to make some money off of it. Are there any other tools that jump out that I've missed? Because I have missed a lot. So one that's pretty new that I haven't done a lot of looking at that I find is really interesting. I find Chip to be fairly interesting. That's why I work there. Because of the consolidation element, we can do some interesting things like have Hootsuite cover our transaction costs so it doesn't cost anything for charities using it. Another really cool one is Givey. They've just kind of have their big coming out. They're in London. They've been around in London for a while. They're now international, and they're doing some really interesting things in the space. I don't know enough about it, but it's super interesting. Givey.co.uk probably. Fascinating. I don't know if it's right for your nonprofit. I don't know enough about it, but I think it's cool. Yeah. We'll dive in. You've already seen the slides. Crowdfunding. I feel like doing a talk on payment processing and not talking about crowdfunding is kind of missing. Obviously it's a really important trend, and it's a really important. It's arguably nothing new. The collective network of individuals, blah blah blah. That's fundraising. It's just we've slapped a new great term on it and called it crowdfunding, and a lot of interesting things are happening in that space under that banner. I think it's sweet, but it's fundraising. It's just in a different form. So the facilitation of crowdfunding online, massive topic, whole other session. But I'm going to just look at some of the tools here really briefly. Why I'm going to look at it is it represents a large and growing, this is US, so a large and growing amount of capital in the States. Obviously a large and growing amount of capital resources in Canada as well. You see some of the big areas that found a way to leverage it. It lends itself to things like social causes and art and certain things. I think there's others that are, you don't see a lot of crowdfunding. You see a lot of like Ride to Conquer, but you don't see a lot of really interesting crowdfunding stuff happening, say, medical charities right now. Or interestingly, and this is just more, interesting, is you don't see a lot of interesting crowdfunding stuff happening in the religious sector, and that's why I say interesting is it's 46% of our Canadian charitable marketplace. So if our marketplace is 116 billion, you can do the math. It's a lot of money, but you don't see a lot of really interesting things, and I just find that odd. Let's look at some tools before I start rambling. So I decided to stick Canadian, and then we'll cover some American flyover really quick. Fundraiser, Chimp, Give Effect, your own site, Peer Giving, and Artez. Again, just simply sticking to the Canadian ones, only because that's what I chose to do. Fundraiser, love it, local, free, super easy to set up, mobile friendly, social integrations. And we'll get to this on the con side, but it's charitable adapted. I would suggest that it wasn't built for the charity marketplace. It was built kind of for this. They're going to hate me for saying it, and they're good people, so I don't mean it negatively, but it was built for like the Kickstarters. Like, I want to fund this, and awesome, and you totally can. And if you're a charity, you can adapt it, and it works. A widget for your own site, that's cool. I think that's coming. I don't know if it's being launched yet. Access to audience. Obviously, like, there is it's not as big as, say, Kickstarter, but there's a big audience on Fundraiser, or so they say. And so you theoretically, by launching a campaign, they're profiling that stuff. You theoretically have access to their audience. Some of the cons, it's a bit pricey. They take $5, you've got to hook up with a payment processor. PayPal, I believe it's an exclusive. So you pay the PayPal rate, you pay their 5%. You're losing around $8 off the top. It's a lack of brand. It's not well known enough to be like its own cool thing, and yet, I don't mean this, whatever. Lack of brand, and it wasn't principally designed for charity. So if you're a charity, a registered charity, it's going to be a bit problematic or a bit more work. The great thing is for guys like Open Media, it's agnostic to whether you're a charity or a nonprofit or anything. So you could use it if you're a nonprofit society, for example. And you don't have charitable status. Great tool. You can use it if you're just a random guy wanting to do something cool. I got a buddy that financed a massive thing, this mixed social enterprise thing, but no hoops to jump through. He'll take the 8% hit because nobody else will help him do it. Is that timer for me? Chip. I mean, we can slam it later. It's easy to use. It's affordable. I mean, it's covered right now, so it's free. It's free for you to set up any campaign. Charities can set them up, or random donors can set them up. We've got people that set up campaigns that don't have a charity yet affiliated with them. They're just raising money. They're going to pool some capital, and they're going to figure out what to do with it after. Tax receipts automatically, because Chimp is a foundation. There's a widget, so you don't have to actually even direct donors off your site. Just plunk in the code, donates right to the giving group. Automated matching. This is really cool. I think Chimp facilitated just around $2-ish million in automated matching last year. It's kind of only platform that as soon as I give, Michael Bublé can match it right away. It does. So I give my $5 and bloop, Michael Bublé's money is also added to that, and now the charity gets its $10, which is cool. Access to donors, though I'll give it. That's limited. I mean, it's got 9,000 members right now, and it's done 21 million. So it's there, but it's it's not like people are just racing to pour you money, give you money, sadly. Some of the cons, and there's good. We can fill this out. Lack of brand. It's on Chimp's site, except if you put a widget on yours. But in Chimp itself, what is Chimp? Donor information, not great. You can message, you can contact, but Chimp was primarily built for donors and not for charities, and so there's a rub there. They're working on it because guys like me are hounding them, but if the donor wants to remain anonymous, they don't want to be contacted with you, blah, 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 blah. That's their prerogative. Chimp stewards that relationship and values that highly, and there's not a lot of customization. You're not given a full range. You're kind of given the sandbox and told to play in it. Give effect, I think it's great. Tax receiving and donor information flows through automatically. It's interactive. It updates automatically. They're hustling and they're doing really well. It's charity focused, so it was built principally as a crowdfunding platform for charities. Cool. The cons again, you're not able to stick a widget on your site, so that's going to result in just by default lower transactional value, and their brand is not high enough. There's a common thread here to really, I'm giving on a Give Effect platform, and only charities that sign up can receive funds. So me as just passionate about David Suzuki Foundation, if I go to Give Effect and I want to create a campaign and I don't see David Suzuki Foundation on there, I've got to go call David Suzuki Foundation and say, hey, I want to run a campaign. And hope that a stewardship person picks up the phone and says, okay, I'll contact Give Effect as a charity now and sign up. So it's not all the charities in Canada aren't baked in. So there's some limitations. But if you as a charity want to run it, it's great. Other tools, Blackbaud's friend asking friends, awesome. That's like the mothership there, right? You're getting the full meal deal. You're paying a sweet, sweet penny for it. But it will make you dinner, or at least it should. Indiegogo, awesome. It's kind of branded itself more towards like the hippie, the art side of things and stuff, but it does all of it. Some of the cons, both Indiegogo and Kickstarter take a massive cut. Thankfully, it's only upon success. So, you can view that for what you'd like, but there is obviously a very low cost to get involved, right? I can go to Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and create my thing, and I only pay when I'm successful. If I'm successful, I will pay, but evaluate that for what it is. They're both very strong brands, which is great. People know I'm running an Indiegogo campaign, I'm running a Kickstarter campaign. Okay, cool. Who is it? That also counts in the negative. And Canada helps, and I don't mean this critically, but I don't know a lot about it, but I know they do have a campaign option on their site. And it's kind of poor form for me not to, fill that more. So, kind of trying to get to the end here of what we talked about. How do we summarize this? In my experience, we need to build a foundation of what the user experience matters most. Think about what your donors want and meet them where they're at. The for-profit world has done this and done it. It's doing this increasingly well. The not-for-profit world has way more to offer this world than selling pants, which are awesome, but not as good as giving money to a charity. Meet the donors where you're at, and I think we started this sector. World Wildlife was kind of, probably coming up on 18 to 20 years ago, was the first to take donations online. One of the first people, and it was click here, fill out this PDF that like print it out and mail it in, and that was taking donations online. And the charity sector has kind of progressed along with that, but it's kind of often been from a what works for us perspective. I get it, I get it, but we're in an era of shifting that mindset of going, what works for the donor? Where do I meet that donor where they are at, and how do I give them the most flippin' fantastic donor experience possible? After that, what matters most to your charities? And what type of resources do you have, and what are you willing to spend to get those results? And I obviously suggest focusing on this before you start chasing products and different processors. So if it's essential that you control every element of the process, or are you okay with somebody else issuing the tax receipts? Are you okay with somebody else's branding? Recognizing that both have pros and cons. If you have really unique donation requirements, or I just want to get the money and get out, and both super valid, but you need to make those decisions for yourself. If you are a tech-driven charity, you probably have staff on hand who can help do some of the development legwork that's required to do an on-site donation. But if you're a one-woman show or a one-man show, you've got to make some compromises. And we have money to invest in this right now, or we have no money. We just need the monies. And again, recognize it's a progression, but the important thing here is to keep moving. So finally, as I said, tools don't raise money, people do. We can chase after the newest solutions, the most awesome things, but we need to recognize that at the end of the day, people give because of this, they give because of a strong relationship here, and they give because of an emotional connection to your cause and a belief that you are going to help them achieve what they want to see in the world. And I think that matters most, and I think that's the way we need to be framing all of these conversations. That's it for me for now.